Thank you for joining us for another interview about our HR passion here at HR Answers. Today we are talking with Jennifer Schoorl, one of our senior consultants here at HR Answers, and her passion is performance management specific to coaching and feedback. So, Jennifer,
That's right.
we get to have a conversation about coaching and feedback.
Awesome.
Good stuff.
I'm excited.
Good. So, just a little bit about yourself and your background, starting with why HR? Why do you stay in HR?
Well, I started in human resources when I was pursuing my degree at Western Oregon University, go Wolves. And I wanted to be a teacher for K through 12. And I volunteered, and big on volunteering when you can to see if you like something or it just may not be the right fit for you, and decided love kids not so much in terms of wanting to be an educator for the rest of my life is what I had thought at the ripe age of 18.
We're so knowledgeable at that age.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so at that point in time, I pivoted over to a psychology degree. And because I do enjoy listening to individuals, I thought, well, this is great. I could go into being a therapist. And at that point in time, again, I volunteered again and realized at that age, boy, there's still a lot I have to learn, so I'm not quite sure if this is really going to be the career choice for me. So I took a break from my education, and at that point in time, the organization I worked for, I got the ability to actually have a conversation with the personnel manager at the organization. And as I was listening to her talk about what she did, I thought, I really like that, and I could still retain my psychology degree and go back and finish. And that started my passion in human resources. So I stay because I love it. I love the variety. I love the fact that I get to interact with people and help them in one capacity or another. But more importantly for me, when I was, again, super young, as a young adult, one of my experiences I had for my first job, which links to my why do I stay, right, in HR. My very, very first real job, I was 15 years old, and I worked there for 3 years. I went in one day, looked at the weekly schedule, and my name wasn't on the weekly schedule. And I was like, what happened? What's going on? You know, what happened? And again, 18 years old. So I went over and they informed me that I was let go. No reason, just thanks, right? And so of course I was crushed, I was devastated, but I had no clue as to what happened, right? So for me, linking back to why do I stay, that feeling of not knowing why or what happened or what could I have done a little differently, how did that shock just really spurred me forward in terms of pursuing my degree, pursuing HR, and as well as linking to the coaching and feedback that I'm super passionate about.
Excellent. Yeah. At 16, I had that same, met somebody in the locker room I hadn't met before, asked what she was going to do. It was the job I was doing. There weren't multiple people doing the job that I was doing. So I went and asked the manager, hey, I just met so-and-so. Oh, I'm sorry. Today's your last day. Thank you. No explanation. No, and it's still, I mean, to this day, fresh as if it happened yesterday.
Exactly.
And I don't think anybody should ever experience that. So being able to influence that is pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Okay, so what types of organizations have you worked for?
Well, you know, I have been pretty well-versed in different industries, different organizations. So over the last 25 years, I've worked in predominantly private sector. I've had the opportunity to work in public sector. I worked a short stint in nonprofit. That was my first HR role, was at a nonprofit organization. And so I've had that. I've worked for small companies, I've worked for large organization, Fortune 500 companies, along with union, non-union, and just a whole vast variety. And in there, I've had the opportunity to work in different avenues of human resources to really hone in on what do I really want to do within the whole functionality of human resources. But all organizations, you know, for me, they all have a culture that is unique to them. And with that, it's just what's always drawn me to an organization is their mission, their vision, and their values. And that's what really resonates with me when I'm making a decision or I'm working with a client even today. It's what is that for you, so that we really link it to that core. Yeah.
In all of those different organizations and in the uniqueness that they all have, is there anything that you find consistent across all of them?
Yeah, everybody thinks they're unique.
True.
And really, I mean, from my advantage point working in all these different ones is there might be a little nuance here and there, but at the surface, from an HR perspective, people are there operating and doing the work, and people really don't change that much within the organization. So, you know, that's my short answer.
And my reference to that frequently is people are still employing the humans. It doesn't matter where you're at. It takes people to get the mission done with the value set that's there, the goals that are put out there. And that's cool. That's where we like to play with the people. So,
absolutely.
Good stuff. Okay. So what types of organizations do you work with now?
So, you know, for us, we get a wide variety, which I love. I feel like what has happened for me is my background is all culminated together, and it has allowed me, when working with clients and organizations that are small, a handful of individuals, a business owner, up to, you know, your mid-sized, you know, organization. They may have, you know, a couple of HR representatives, but being able just to work with that wide variety of individuals and organizations is what we do. And I really enjoy that body of work and being able to bring my background and my knowledge. We have organizations that do have unions and that are non-union, to just a whole host of factors that are pretty amazing.
It's a good group of people.
Correct.
So we get to touch a lot of stuff in HR. Like you talked about, you've had the opportunity to work in various areas, kind of hone in on what is it that I like the most. So your passion, coaching, and feedback. Why? Why is that the thing that?
Well, under the emphasis of performance management, right? I would say, again, going back to my why, right? What spurred me, that feeling that I received as a young adult, and what that felt like for me. Being able to continue that thread through all the different types of work that I do, that we do, to help support other people. But that's really just for me, that just continues to be a driving force for me when I am working with people, right? And people want to know, right? So they want to know where they're at. They want the honesty. They want to understand. Some people are a little afraid of it, but at the same time, others really welcome and are open to an earnest conversation when it's intended to be earnest as well, right? Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think the main considerations are for HR professionals as they're approaching performance management, coaching, and feedback?
So the first thing that came to my mind when thinking about this is really sticking to the facts, right? When we talk about people and we think about that coaching and feedback arena, this is where you are engaging in communication with each other, but at the same time, it's all in this spirit of helping to develop and grow, right? So as an HR professional, having those listening ears actively ready to go, along with help me understand in terms of what's really at play here, right? And that active listening really needs to hone in on identifying the stories that are being told by the other individuals, along with the uncovering those facts to really help move forward to identify what needs to happen next. How do we be curious in terms of our conversations to find out what's really going on here? And I think for an HR professional, it's really learning to master that tentative speak, right? You've indicated X sounds a little bit like you might be feeling, insert Y, and just not being afraid of really just listening and asking those questions. I think it's just very vital in this arena of coaching and feedback.
Definitely a skill to develop.
It is, yes. We're not. I don't think we're intuitively born with this active listening capability. It's an ebb and flow, and some people pick it up more so than others. And there's many, like myself, you have to continue to practice at it, and that's okay. And not, yeah.
Is the saying something like listen to understand, not to solve?
Correct.
The solve will come eventually.
Correct.
But if you don't understand, or if you don't have a true accurate picture of what all is involved, that's always for me been a key to hold on to, as well as just that reality of frequently when something's brought to you as an HR professional, what's being conveyed is one person's story, one person's opinion, and to not adopt that immediately, but to be able to move on and gather more information to become informed.
Correct.
That's it, to become informed, because it's not just a person's path forward, it's usually a group of people.
Correct.
Sometimes it's the entire organization for that matter.
Yes.
But those are difficult to sit back. At one point in time, I love data, so
Yes.
I like to put it into those kinds of terms. But at one point in time, I did go through all of the matters that have been brought forward that I needed to deal with, just to analyze, was the root cause, the belief of what was wrong on day one of the conversation, what was actually wrong when we had gathered all the facts. And 80% of the time, it had nothing to do with the initial perception of what was wrong. It was something totally different. And just to look at that, it's a huge number, 80%. That's the majority of this, means it's been misinterpreted.
Correct. Well, and I think that leads into the don't be so quick to solve. As what's being presented in front of you today, and that really is, through those more timeless and conscientious and mindful conversations, right? Which are difficult. Let's not, can be difficult, I should say. Yeah.
So, tools that people might have available to them to help navigate through difficult conversations, through coaching and feedback.
Well, when you think about this, I think there's this natural tendency when we talk about performance management and coaching and feedback to go to the dark side, right? To go to the negative, where, really the intent, especially when you think about it in sports and other arenas, the intent is to help somebody develop and grow to be the best that they can, and perhaps grow even beyond that, right? That's always a nice to have, but sometimes at least can we at least make sure that you're mastering what X, right, before we even consider moving on, right? And so there's a couple of things that, there's a few things that I think about when I think of tools and resources, right? So there's always the look internally, right, and within your organization, right? Is there practice or trainings that are being offered to help, anyone be successful in communication. And then from there, understanding what it means to manage others, coach others, the difference between the two, and really just learn in the internal, what do we have available to us today that's right at our fingertips, right? Then when we think about the external component, there's always going to be that natural, okay, I can Google anything, right? So, and there's a lot on coaching and feedback that's out there. The other internal component too is the performance appraisal on one-on-ones, right? So let's not sell those short, because they really are a huge opportunity for individuals and organizations to really learn about, where am I at today? What's happening, and what other things should we be talking about and considering, right? Such as a individual development plan or something of that nature. So then when we think about that external, maybe it's a goal that somebody has or something that they want to learn. You look at other additional trainings that might be available externally, in addition to anything you could Google that's out there. And then of course, when you Google and want to know HR Answers, it's going to be right there, because we actually do provide trainings when it comes to coaching and feedback and communication and respectful workplace, all those things that really feed into that pipeline of making this a successful, a successful venture for everybody within an organization. And then for me, the other component too is HR Answers provides and can support one-on-one coaching with individuals that might need that extra support, or an individual to help them through something, or hey, how do I grow and develop and encourage so I can actually move over a hurdle into a skill that I want to perfect, or I want to be better at, fill in blank. And then another thing, the last thing I would say that I think organizations sometimes sell short is if they have an employee assistance plan, an EAP. Those are rich with resources that are available that are in most cases no cost initially, and perhaps even over some time, to the individuals that are seeking some additional support in all of these areas. And I've been a huge proponent of EAPs when I started in human resources, and still am today, because they have resources available.
A good EAP program, I'm a big fan, especially of those that have specific components for supervisors, that you can call and say, hey, I'm a supervisor.
Correct.
Trying to figure out how to do this with an employee, and getting their take on the context of the issue or the matter that we're trying to work through, so that we can have that positive outcome. We're not just on the dark side of,
yes,
yet again, we have a difficult conversation to have.
Yes.
But, green and growing, we might get some flowers too if we actually address it in a productive way, which is nice.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. I also think maybe peer networks are a great way. I mean, we're more than happy to have people come to us too, but just like Paherma and the networking that they offer, that reaching out to people that have experience in those areas and just saying, have you ever faced this before? I had a huge leg up in my first HR director role, and there were about 80 other HR directors in the same organization. And I could reach out and say, I've never had this experience before, or this particular circumstance. Can you tell me what you've done, or what tactics you've tried, and what worked and what didn't, and just to kind of feel it out with somebody else that I could kick the ball around with a little bit.
Right.
That already knew all the laws that we're dealing with, and generally all the policies that we're dealing with, and maybe even the collective bargaining agreement plan, but finding that kind of peer partner to be able to say, hey, this is a new one for me, what do I do?
Correct, and sometimes your associations, right, that you might be affiliated with could also have some resources that are available. But I also think too that there are times when a manager can have an employee that really just has high goals and expectations, and they're a strong high performer, and maybe you just don't have, a manager or supervisor may not have enough time on their plate in which to again, continue that encouragement. So there might be other avenues through a peer network or other ways that you can help provide that support for that individual's ongoing continued success, right? So.
Absolutely. Good. Okay. So in this area, what are some missteps that you've seen or errors that you would want to help somebody avoid?
So when I thought about this, both personally and professionally, it really boiled down to the same common thing, and that is time. Coaching and feedback takes time. Somebody who is really good at that commits to the time, and they block out that time. And I know for me, that's where that struggle would be, and especially when I was managing others, right, as well. It's okay, this has now come in as a priority. I think we did really well from the last time. Maybe we can move it out a couple of weeks, and that right there is when it all starts to really just not have the connotation of seriousness that I think both parties probably started out with. And it can happen. It's just at some point in time somebody has to say, we need to get this back on and we need to make sure that we're supporting each other. So time really is the crux. And I know when I've, as an HR professional, worked with many managers and supervisors and even employees who are in this relationship and they want to groom or grow, or they don't understand if they're on a performance improvement plan or something that they're trying to walk through, that there is there needs to be that time to be able to sit down, talk through what's happening, what's being observed, give that constructive feedback, talk it through, and see what needs to happen next.
If all management were one and done, it would be really easy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and there's no short-term fix to this type of a relationship. When we talk about, it's ongoing. Yes, there might be, the ideal is that when you are in a coaching relationship, you've established what is it that we're wanting to do, and that you have that so you can continue this, this tag game of here we are, let's talk about what was observed or seen or what happened lately, and let's talk it through, and here we go to the next stage, right? With that, it's not a one and done. It's not a quick fix. There really does need to be some leveraging of we're in this together, and it's going to take 6 to 12 months perhaps, right, for us to get through this together.
Do you think 6 to 12 months is a pretty typical timeline for coaching to be able to see not only whatever the base need for change is, but then also to be able to observe how to apply that?
I think yes, yeah. I mean, if I were to look back at a lot of the situations that I've assisted others with, I would say yes, start out with the mindset that you're going to do 6 months to 12 months, set your goals, set your ideas, the concepts, right? And at least at that point in time, you've given yourself the ability and the confirmation that we're in this together, right? And you're blocking out your calendar, you're doing what you need in order to do that. But you're also going to be taking the opportunity at that point in time to say, okay, here's where we're at. How do we feel, right? Do we need to extend it for another period of time? Yeah.
And a success story. It's story time. We love stories. What's one of the best success stories that you want to share?
So I actually had two when I thought about this one, and one is more of a personal, which is for me. So I talked about my earlier situation that had happened, but when I was at Western, I actually worked in the dorm maintenance department. So for an individual who knew how to use a paintbrush and maybe pick up a hammer, right, to being a student worker and spending my hours out in the dorms fixing things was a whole new experience. But this manager that was there was amazing. And he would take the time to teach, train, do the train the trainer, right? Now show me, right? So it really was, there was just an utmost, what do I want to say? He had the utmost patience of anybody who, honestly, I've ever met. And so what I found that he did for me was he was able to understand where my limits were. I was not a technically savvy individual when we talk about maintenance.
We buy new tools in our house when I pick them up. So
But
I'll
what-
stick with Excel.
But what he did was he learned where my comfort level was, and so he would save the tickets, the maintenance tickets for me that were within my wheelhouse for me. So when I would come on, would have the autonomy and the empowerment to go out and at least do some stuff that I knew how to do and I was good at. And then I would circle back around and I'd shadow him and he'd do again, let's show you how to do this one more time, right? But it was always in the spirit of we're here together. So that was just amazing. The other one that I thought was really would resonate with a number of folks too is when I worked for an organization, there was a manager that had just recently been promoted, and she had 2 departments that she was responsible for. And she came in after somebody who really wasn't, I would say, empowering and had built up a wonderful relationship with either of these departments. And I think we can all say we've been there, done that. Or we've worked with somebody who's had to come behind and say, hey, what do we need to do? There was a lack of trust amongst these teams.
No, I see it now.
No motivation, yet no engagement or very little engagement. So we partnered together, we created a strategy to begin team building, to implement one-on-ones, and that was a focus for her. She worked with her supervisor. She just really, as she got down with every single person on the team, and she spent X amount of time with them to learn what they did, understood, and gathered from them feedback on what was going well, what was not going well, what could we do to improve, gathered all this information, and started just to making a difference. And one of the other things that I just absolutely appreciate about her, she created a community garden for her team, right? So all of these things really were just amazing. And for her, 2 years in a row, her engagement survey results, because this was an organization that did engagement surveys, were among the top 10 managers for the organization. It was a pretty large organization, that her results were in that top 10. So 2 years in a row, and I left after that. So, but just really, it's a beautiful story of saying, hey, right? Let's take a look at that vision. And that's why it was so successful. She had a vision in her mind of what she wanted to accomplish and what she wanted to do, and she rallied people around her. And she wasn't afraid to ask questions, and she wasn't afraid to admit that she had, I screwed up on that one, made a mistake. And people saw her just as a, even though she, obviously was the manager, but somebody that cared and had compassion for them, and really just listened and then actively followed up after that, right? So I thought that was another great example.
I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Sure.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
So I've had similar situations where somebody's coming in, there's work to be done. We start down that path and we're gonna get there, we're moving. Is anybody resistive of those team members to that one-on-one? We're gonna have one-on-one meetings. We're gonna, do these. Was there any kind of resistance in that?
Oh, she had some, absolutely. And even in staff meetings that I attended, you could see some of that resistance because that's just, we're all human, and some people, it takes a while to build some sort of trust, and sometimes it may not even be evident, but it's still consistency. You're still going to do it. You might restructure that one-on-one perhaps just a little bit because you're learning, right? And you want to build that trust. Have some core elements that are always going to be consistent regardless of, but you might have, restructure just a little bit to create a different dynamic with individuals that are more resistant, because change is tough.
Well, and I think
That's a whole different subject.
Yeah. But I like where you went with that, the flexibility for the different people and where each of them are at in that process of change that she knew needed to happen for the organization, but she also wanted to see for all of them, because it just makes a better place to be. And that, I think that was one of the things that I struggled with when I first started supervising staff. And I shared earlier when I was talking with Anna about, being a very black and white person. Data was my life, numbers were my life. 2 + 2 is 4. There are no shades of gray to that. That's it. But the humans are only shades of gray. That's the only way it works. And as a supervisor, realizing that it wasn't just my way. That I have to get this done. These are the 9, we do 45-minute one-on-ones, and these are the things. It's like, I had some core stuff I needed to cover. We did it, but I did it in a different way that worked for every single one of those people. Did I still get the job done? Yes, but there's 900 ways to get to the same end. And that flexibility being a huge key in all of this, because even the best coaching plan, and coaching a number of clients over the years, we had a plan that we started with, and it bobs and weaves a bit.
Absolutely.
To meet whatever, it could be we thought we were going to work on something, but the experience of the work at that point in time really just didn't lead to being able to test some new skills or try some new avenues, but it opened up some other doors.
Absolutely.
So being nimble with that and not getting frustrated that we're not following the plan, we're still making forward progress.
Absolutely.
And that was important.
Absolutely. It's those check-ins that are super important, through that process. Is this working for us? Yes or no? But you're not going to ask that at the very beginning. Just saying, right? You got to build that trust and that relationship, between the two, between individuals, and then you can really kind of dig in just a little bit more on, okay, is this really working for us? Or do we need to pivot and be okay with that? It's important.
Great. So what do you think the skills are? I think we've talked about some of them, but what skills do you think an HR professional has to have to be successful in this particular area?
Well, definitely the ability to listen. And this isn't just sitting there listening.
Sure. Because I have this card game I can play on you just talk. I'm taking notes.
Active listening is hard, and it can be slightly stressful, and it can also wear people down. But once you just keep practicing and practicing and practicing, it becomes easier to do. It doesn't flow off the tongue all the time, so to speak. But still, that is definitely just a number one for sure. Being able to be curious with questions, right? And when I say that, what I mean is really suspending the judgments in our own heads, our own biases, our own backgrounds, to really lean in and listen and say, can you tell me, when you said this, can you tell me a little bit more about that? I'd really like to hear, or, do you think that this might be something that we should explore just a little bit more? And really lean into that from that perspective. Seeking, with respect to this, seeking the truth. As humans, we tell a lot of stories. In the absence of no information, we make stuff up because that's what works and that's what we do. But really being able to find those facts and those truths that are embedded in there can be very helpful when it comes to, providing feedback and making some collective decisions or collaborative decisions between individuals on that coaching, on that coaching plan is very helpful, and then I would say, as an HR professional, it's leading by example. And it's easy to say, and sometimes, you know, we tend to be in the spotlight a lot more, just because, right? We're the ones that are out there trying to help manage and facilitate, as well as teach, coach, listen, all of those components. But really it is leading by example.
I think interesting component for me is watching individuals try and hold back on those judgments, those personal bias that we have. And let's talk about unconscious bias just a little bit. If you haven't been able to figure out your bias, because we all have them, regardless.
Yes, we do.
We all have them, conscious and unconscious. My words were, if you haven't gotten straight with your own bias, the ability to say, yeah, this is how I feel about this, but that is not their situation. That is not this component. And being able to separate those, and if you haven't gotten straight on your own stuff, it's a little rough.
Yes,
to try and see through the weeds to
Right.
help somebody else with that, because you're quite honestly stuck in your own.
Correct.
So you gotta own your own stuff along with it.
Yeah.
Which is a growth in and of itself, just for an individual. And if you're not willing to face some of that and deal with some of it, it will hold you back, I think, from being successful as an HR professional. There's always opportunity. And grabbing a hold of those that are meaningful for you, yeah, do it.
Yeah.
It's worth it. It's worth the time.
It's too true. I mean, as an HR professional in any capacity, I mean, ultimately, we're not technically managing other people. We are coaching, we're facilitating, we're trying to be the cheerleader, as well as we're also saying, ooh, that could come with some serious risks, and let's talk about that. So we tend to be the naysayer, or, you know, fill in blank. But with that, I mean, we really are that coach. Let's talk about what that's going to look like next. You know, let's lay this out and play it out if we can, right? Or good job, you know, you went and you did this. You know, that's amazing. And how did that feel? What would you do differently if you had to do it again? And just really start to unpack that. It's not leave it as is, but really start to unpack it. You know,
understand and move on,
Mm-hmm.
not just move on.
Yeah, exactly.
Good stuff. So tips and tricks. What tips and tricks would you share with people for this? We got time. I love that one. I hadn't thought of that one
Yeah.
when you first said this was your topic, but you're right. Time. Even just the fundamental of when I've scheduled coaching with people, I schedule out pretty much every 2 weeks for at least an hour,
Mm-hmm.
an hour of actual conversation with somebody, plus an hour of follow-up
Yeah. Yeah.
for 6 months.
Yeah.
It's a commitment. It's time.
It really is. And I think, you know, as well, what I also would say, you know, as a part of, you know, our follow-up too on some tips and tricks are really understanding the difference between a manager and a coach, right? Some managers are great at managing people. They may not be necessarily the best coach for individuals, and truly understanding what that looks like, and know your own strengths, and know your opportunities, and know your other resources that are available to help through that process. So it can really, it doesn't just unfold before somebody's eyes, right? Another, you know, again, tip and trick would be just the communication component, right? Understand how to effectively communicate so that you really do start to see that partnership, that growth together, so that we don't say something to one another that feels awkward or uncomfortable, and then it just sort of sits, and then we leave with that resonating in our minds, right? It really is being comfortable with exploring things that are being said so you can move through that. And that is really helpful as well.
I like those. Okay, so one last thing, and it doesn't even have to be related to this. If you could give one tip to HR professionals, what would it be?
So there's this old saying, never let them see you sweat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for an HR professional, I would say, never let them see the shock, dismay, or insert whatever emotion on your face. And try to remain in a neutral yet open posture, stance, facial, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, put on your best poker face.
And it doesn't mean that you're like, as an example, you're like this the entire time. It's really because that in its own, just that moment where you're listening to somebody share whatever it is that they've come to share with you, if it can tell the next step depends on how you react as an HR professional. So don't take it personal.
One of my coaches talked to me because of my black and whiteness. That ability to poker face it was not great for a number of years. But one of the things a coach told me to do is when people were telling you that and you're telling you something and you're caught off guard or you're having a reaction to it, to maintain the posture but write a note.
Mm-hmm.
So that I can keep track of why does that seem to bring forward some emotion for me? Why do I think that's nuts?
Yeah.
Why do I not think that's nuts? I mean, so that I can do some compare and contrast, again, leveraging the thing that I really like, which is data. I was documenting some data for myself to be able to go back and look at, but just really interesting. And then of course for myself, not letting those things sit. Should that have even brought up that emotion? Or is it because I know of the 19 other things that are going on that involve this individual, just what is it? Why is that the reaction? Which was helped filter later because I had a different outlet for it, which was just scribbling myself a note. No big deal. So the face didn't have to show it. Not sure I'm good with the poker facing still, but
But I think that can make a difference.
Good. Well, okay, that's our session for today.
Awesome.
So thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
And we will see all of you again in another interview.